I pretended not to speak English while working as a maid for a wealthy family. They discussed everything in front of me: scams, affairs, secret accounts. When the master of the house tried to cheat me on my salary, I quietly said in flawless English, "I'm glad you're here with me. Please listen to my story till the end and let me know which city you're listening from. That way I can see how far my story has traveled." I never thought I'd end up cleaning toilets at 58 years old, but life has a funny way of humbling you when you least expect it. My name is Margaret Collins, and 6 months before I walked into the Holloway mansion on Beacon Hill, I was living what I thought was a comfortable middle-class life in suburban Boston. My husband David died suddenly of a heart attack. No warning. One Tuesday morning, he kissed me goodbye, and by noon I was identifying his body at Massachusetts General Hospital. The grief was crushing, but what came after was worse. I discovered that David had made some terrible financial decisions in his last years: investments in his brother's failed restaurant, loans he'd co-signed that went unpaid, credit card debt he'd hidden from me. Within 4 months, I lost our house. At my age, with only retail experience from decades ago and a gap in my resume, decent jobs were impossible to find. My daughter Jessica lived in Seattle with her own family and student loans. She offered to help, but I couldn't burden her. Pride? Maybe. Or just the stubborn independence that my generation was raised with. That's when I saw the ad on Craigslist. Housekeeper needed for private residence, live-in position, competitive salary. I called the number, spoke to a clipped, efficient woman named Victoria Holloway. She asked if I had experience. I lied and said yes. She asked if I had references. I gave her the names of 2 friends who agreed to vouch for me. The interview was brief. Victoria Holloway was a tall, angular woman in her early 40s, with the kind of blonde hair that costs $500 to maintain. She walked me through the 4-story brownstone, explaining that she and her husband Richard needed someone 5 days a week. Monday through Friday, weekends off. A small room on the 4th floor would be mine. "Do you speak any other languages?" she asked absently, running her finger along a bookshelf to check for dust. Something in her tone, dismissive, almost contemptuous, made me pause. And then, on impulse, I lied again. "No English good," I said in a thick, fabricated accent. "I speak Russian, little English, but I clean good." I don't know what possessed me. Maybe it was the way she'd looked at me. Through me, really. Like I was already invisible. I'd taken Russian language classes in college decades ago. I was rusty, but I could fake it well enough. Victoria's expression shifted immediately. She looked almost pleased. "Oh, well, that's fine, as long as you can understand basic instructions." She spoke slower, louder. "You, clean, house, understand?" "Da," I said. "Yes, I understand." I got the job. The first week, I kept my head down and my mouth shut. I scrubbed floors, washed windows, did laundry, and cooked simple meals. The Holloways barely acknowledged my existence. Richard Holloway was a financial consultant, mid-50s, silver-haired, with a kind of practiced charm that probably played well in boardrooms. He'd nod at me in the mornings, sometimes grunt a "good morning," but that was it. Their teenage son, Brandon, was away at boarding school. I only saw him in photographs scattered throughout the house. A lanky kid with his mother's sharp features and his father's calculating eyes. It was during my second week that I realized the opportunity I'd stumbled into. I was dusting Richard's study on a Tuesday afternoon when he took a phone call. He didn't even glance at me. I was just part of the furniture. "Listen, Tom," he said, pacing near the window. "The Westfield account is going to take a hit, but we can absorb it through the offshore setup. They'll never trace it back to the firm." I kept dusting, my heart suddenly pounding. "Victoria doesn't know about the full amount," he continued, "and she doesn't need to. What she doesn't know won't hurt her. Or me. He laughed, a cold sound. Just make sure the Cayman transfers are clean. I don't need the SEC sniffing around. I moved to the bookshelf, my hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. This was illegal. This was fraud. And he was discussing it 10 feet away from me because he thought I couldn't understand a word. Over the next few weeks, I learned everything. Victoria was having an affair with their neighbor, a divorced architect named Paul Hendricks. I overheard her phone conversations, whispered and urgent, talking about leaving Richard once the settlement was right. Richard was systematically hiding assets, property in Florida, investments in his mother's name, cash accounts in the Caribbean. They were both preparing for war. They just didn't know it yet. And they certainly didn't know that the quiet Russian housekeeper was listening to every word. The first real sting came on a Friday afternoon 3 months into my employment. Richard called me into his study. He stood behind his massive oak desk holding an envelope. Marina, he said. That was the name I'd given them, Marina Volkov. We need to discuss your salary. I stood there, hands folded, expression neutral. Yes, sir. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I'm afraid we've been overpaying you. Victoria reviewed the household budget and we need to make some adjustments. Starting next month, your salary will be reduced by 30%. My stomach dropped. 30%. That would barely cover my basic expenses. Also, he continued, sliding the envelope across the desk, we'll need to withhold taxes going forward. We should have been doing that from the start. This is your adjusted payment for this month. I opened the envelope. The check was for less than half of what I was owed. I looked up at him. Richard's smile widened. He thought he had me. He thought I had nowhere to go, no recourse, no voice. How wrong he was. Mr. Holloway, I said quietly, my accent dropping away, my English suddenly crisp and perfect. I think we need to have a different conversation. The color drained from his face. Richard's mouth opened, then closed. For perhaps the first time in his privileged life, he was genuinely speechless. I watched the realization crawl across his face like a shadow. Every conversation, every phone call, every careless word spoken in my presence. You, he finally managed, you speak English. Fluently, I said. I'm from Worcester originally, graduated from Boston University in 1988. I've been listening to everything for 3 months, Mr. Holloway, everything. He gripped the edge of his desk. What do you want? I picked up the envelope with the insulting check inside and held it between 2 fingers. Right now, I want what I'm owed, full payment, and I want to keep working here at my original salary. And if I refuse, I tilted my head. Then I suppose Victoria might be interested to know about your Cayman accounts, or perhaps the Securities and Exchange Commission would enjoy reviewing your creative approach to the Westfield portfolio. Richard's jaw tightened. We stared at each other for a long moment. I could see him calculating, weighing options, trying to find an angle. Finally, he opened his desk drawer and pulled out his checkbook. You're making a serious mistake, he said as he wrote. No, I replied. You made the mistake when you assumed I was stupid. He handed me a check for the full amount. I folded it carefully and put it in my pocket. I'll see you Monday, Mr. Holloway. I walked out of that study with my knees shaking and my heart racing. What had I just done? I'd backed a powerful, wealthy man into a corner. A man who was already committing fraud, already willing to bend rules and hurt people to protect his interests. That night, alone in my small 4th-floor room, I took inventory of my situation. I was 58 years old with almost no savings. My only income was this job, which I'd just turned into a powder keg. I had no family nearby except Jessica, 3,000 miles away. I had friends, but none who could help if Richard Holloway decided to destroy me. On the other hand, I had information. I had 3 months of overheard conversations, names, dates, account numbers. I'd glimpsed on documents left carelessly on Richard's desk. I had knowledge of Victoria's affair, of Richard's hidden assets, of business deals that skirted or outright violated federal law. The question was, what was I going to do with it? I couldn't go to the police. Not yet. I didn't have hard evidence, just overheard conversations. Any lawyer worth their retainer would shred my testimony. I was a disgruntled housekeeper with an axe to grind. Richard would paint me as a con artist, maybe even accuse me of extortion for our confrontation earlier. But I could gather evidence, real, tangible, documented evidence. I pulled out a notebook and started writing. I documented every conversation I could remember. Dates, times, what was said. I noted the names Richard had mentioned. Tom Brennan, his accountant, Marcus Chen, his lawyer, David Westfield, the client whose account was being manipulated. I made a list of the documents I'd seen. Financial statements with the Cayman bank headers, property deeds for the Florida real estate, emails about the offshore accounts. I didn't have copies yet, but I knew where Richard kept them. My first plan began to take shape. I would stay in this house. I would continue to be the perfect housekeeper, quiet and efficient. But now, instead of just listening, I would document everything. I would photograph documents when the opportunity arose. I would record conversations if I could do it safely. And then, when I had enough evidence, I would take it to someone who could actually do something about it. The SEC, maybe, or a journalist, or perhaps just Victoria's divorce attorney when the time came. The question that kept me awake that night was simple. Was I brave enough to do this? Was I willing to risk everything on this gamble? I thought about David, about our house that we'd lost, about the retirement we'd planned that would never happen, about working until I died because I had no other choice. I thought about the way Richard had smiled at me that afternoon, so confident in his power over someone he saw as beneath him. Yes, I was willing to risk it. Sunday, my day off, I took the train into Boston and bought a small digital camera, the kind that looked like an outdated point-and-shoot but had decent resolution. I bought a voice recorder small enough to hide in my pocket. I withdrew $50 from my meager bank account for these purchases, money I could barely afford to spend. At a public library, I opened a new email account under a pseudonym. I started a digital folder where I could store copies of anything I managed to document. Monday morning, I returned to the Holloway house with my camera hidden in my cleaning supply caddy. Victoria greeted me at the door with her usual cool indifference. "Marina, I trust you had a pleasant weekend?" "Yes, ma'am," I said in my Russian accent. "Very nice. Thank you." She didn't know. Richard hadn't told her about our confrontation. Interesting. He was keeping secrets from his wife about me, just like he was keeping secrets about everything else. I went to work, dusting and vacuuming and doing laundry, but now I was also watching, waiting for my first opportunity. It came on Wednesday afternoon. Richard left for a business lunch, and Victoria went to her yoga class. I had 2 hours alone in the house. I went straight to Richard's study. My hands trembled as I opened his file cabinet. It wasn't even locked. Why would it be? Who did he have to fear in his own home? I found the Cayman account statements first. 5 accounts totaling over $3 million. Money that wasn't declared on any joint tax return, I was certain. I photographed every page. The camera shutter made tiny clicking sounds that seemed deafening in the silent house. Each photograph felt like a small act of rebellion and a massive risk. I worked quickly, methodically, my hands steadier now that I was actually doing something instead of just planning. After the Cayman statements, I found the Florida property documents, 2 beachfront condos in Miami, both titled in the name of Helen Holloway, Richard's elderly mother, who lived in a nursing home in Connecticut, a woman with advancing dementia who certainly hadn't purchased luxury real estate. I photographed those too. Then I found something even more damning. printed emails between Richard and his accountant, Tom Brennan. The subject line on one made my breath catch: Westfield reallocation strategy. I read quickly as I photographed. Tom, we need to move fast on this. Westfield's principal is 2.3 matters. I'm proposing we shift $800K into the high-risk derivatives I mentioned, but we'll report to him that we're keeping everything in stable bonds. If the derivatives hit, we split the profit 60-40. If they tank, Westfield takes the loss and never knows what actually happened. He trusts me completely. Been his advisor for 12 years. He doesn't read the detailed statements. Richard's response was brief. Agreed. Make it happen. And Tom, no paper trail on our end. This wasn't just hiding assets from his wife. This was active fraud against a client. This was criminal. I heard a car door slam outside. My heart stopped. I shoved the emails back into the folder, closed the file cabinet, and grabbed my camera. I was halfway to the door when I heard Victoria's voice in the foyer. "Hello, Marina?" She was home early. I ducked into the hallway bathroom, flushed the toilet, and ran the water. When I emerged, Victoria was standing at the top of the stairs, still in her yoga clothes, holding a green smoothie. "There you are," she said. "Did you clean Richard's study today?" "Yes, ma'am, this morning." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Was anyone else here? Any visitors?" "No, ma'am, just me, very quiet." She studied me for a moment longer than was comfortable. "All right. I need you to start dinner early tonight. Richard is bringing a client home at 6. "Yes, ma'am." As she walked away, I noticed she glanced back at Richard's study door. Had I left something out of place? Had she noticed something? That night, I transferred all the photos from my camera to my secret email account, uploading them from the public library during my evening walk. I deleted them from the camera's memory card. The digital copies were now safely stored in the cloud, accessible only to me. I had evidence now, real evidence. The question was what to do with it. Thursday morning, I made my first official move. During my break, I walked to a coffee shop 6 blocks from the Holloway house and used their Wi-Fi to access the SEC's website. There was a section for reporting suspected securities fraud. I read through the requirements carefully. I wasn't ready to file a full report yet. I wanted more documentation first. But I filled out a preliminary inquiry form, asking general questions about what constituted investment fraud and what kind of evidence was needed for an investigation. I used my pseudonymous email address and didn't mention any names, but I was laying groundwork. That evening, Richard came home late. I was in the kitchen finishing the dinner dishes when he walked in. He stopped when he saw me, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. "Marina," he finally said, his voice carefully neutral. "How are you settling in?" The question seemed odd. I'd been there for over 3 months. "Very well, sir. Thank you." "Good. That's good." He loosened his tie. "You know, Victoria mentioned you were near my study this afternoon. Just cleaning, I assume." There it was. He was probing. "Yes, sir. I clean every room, every day." Of course you do." He smiled, but it was strained. "Just want to make sure you're comfortable, that you have everything you need." "I am very comfortable, sir." He nodded slowly. "Excellent. Well, have a good evening, Marina." After he left, I realized my hands were shaking again. They knew something was off. Maybe they didn't know what exactly, but they sensed a change. Richard was worried, and Victoria was watching. Friday afternoon provided the confirmation. I was vacuuming the second-floor hallway when I heard Victoria on the phone in her bedroom. The door was slightly ajar. "I'm telling you, Paul, something's different. She's acting strange." A pause. "No, not strange exactly. Just, I don't know. More present, maybe. Like she's paying attention now." Another pause. "Richard's been paranoid all week. He asked me twice if I'd noticed anything unusual about the housekeeper. Why would he care?" Victoria's voice dropped lower. unless he said something to her he shouldn't have. My heart hammered in my chest. I kept vacuuming, the motor's noise covering any sound of my presence. I know, you're right. I'm probably being paranoid too. This divorce is making me see threats everywhere. A bitter laugh. But if Richard thinks she knows something, he'll get rid of her. He doesn't take chances. I shut off the vacuum and moved quietly down the hall. Get rid of her, what did that mean exactly? Fire me or something worse? That evening, I returned to the library and drafted a detailed email to my daughter Jessica. I explained everything, the pretense, the information I'd learned, the evidence I was gathering, the confrontation with Richard. I attached copies of the documents I'd photographed. I didn't send it, but I saved it as a draft. If something happened to me, Jessica would know to look for it. The next morning, Saturday, my day off, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went to see a lawyer. The law office of Patricia Chen was in a modest building in Cambridge, far from the polished high-rises where Richard's attorneys worked. I'd found her through an online search for lawyers who specialized in employment law and whistleblower protection. Her consultation fee was $50, money I could barely afford but had to spend. Patricia was a woman in her late 40s with kind eyes and an air of competence that immediately put me at ease. I sat across from her desk and told her everything. She listened without interrupting, taking notes on a legal pad. When I finished, she sat back and studied me for a long moment. "Mrs. Collins, do you understand the risk you're taking?" "I think so." "I don't think you do." She leaned forward. "Richard Holloway is a wealthy man with expensive lawyers. If he suspects you're gathering evidence against him, he could come after you for extortion, theft of private documents, violating confidentiality agreements." "I never signed a confidentiality agreement." "Doesn't matter. He'll claim you did, or that one was implied. He'll bury you in legal fees before you ever get to testify against him." She paused. "And that's assuming he plays by legal rules. Men like that sometimes don't." The implication hung in the air between us. "So what should I do?" I asked. "Walk away? Let him commit fraud and hide millions from his wife?" "I'm not saying that. I'm saying you need to be smart about this." Patricia tapped her pen on the desk. "First, document everything going forward. Dates, times, conversations. Keep a journal. Second, only gather evidence that's left in plain sight. No breaking into locked drawers or password-protected computers. Third, consider who your allies are. The SEC, Victoria's divorce attorney, a journalist? Which would you recommend?" "Honestly? Victoria's divorce attorney. She has the most to gain and the resources to act quickly. The SEC moves slowly and journalists can't protect you from retaliation." She wrote down a name and number. "This is Laura Friedman. She's one of the best divorce attorneys in Boston. She's represented women who've discovered hidden assets before. Tell her I sent you." I took the paper. "What will this cost me?" "Today? Nothing. You're a potential whistleblower and I do some pro bono work." Patricia's expression softened. "But Mrs. Collins, be careful, very careful." I returned to the Holloway house Sunday evening feeling both empowered and terrified. I had a plan now, a real plan. Monday morning during my lunch break, I would call Laura Friedman, but the Holloways moved first. Monday morning, I arrived at the house to find both Richard and Victoria waiting for me in the kitchen. This was unusual. Richard was normally at his office by this time, and Victoria was usually at her Pilates class. "Marina, sit down, please," Victoria said, gesturing to a chair at the kitchen table. My stomach nodded. "Is something wrong?" "That depends," Richard said. He stood with his arms crossed, his expression cold. "We've been reviewing our household expenses, and we've realized we can't justify the cost of a full-time housekeeper anymore." Here it was, they were firing me. "We're going to have to let you go," Victoria continued, "effective immediately. We'll pay you through the end of this week, of course." I looked between them. Richard's face was a mask of barely contained hostility. Victoria seemed almost sympathetic, but her eyes were calculating. "May I ask why?" I said carefully, maintaining my accent. "I work very hard. House is always clean." "It's not about your work," Victoria said. "It's purely financial." "We're making changes across the board," Richard added, "tightening our budget." I let the silence stretch. They were lying, and we all knew it. The question was whether I would call them on it. Finally, I dropped the accent. "Is this really about money, Mr. Holloway? Or is it about the Cayman accounts you don't want me knowing about?" Victoria's head snapped toward her husband. "What?" Richard's face flushed red. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I know exactly what I'm talking about. 5 accounts totaling over $3 million. Property in Florida titled to your mother. The Westfield fraud you're planning with Tom Brennan." I stood up. "Should I continue?" "Get out," Richard said, his voice shaking with rage. "Get out of my house right now, or I'll call the police and have you arrested for extortion." "Go ahead," I said, my heart pounding but my voice steady. "I'm sure they'd be very interested in examining those files in your study." Victoria was staring at Richard now with an expression I'd never seen before, shock mixed with dawning realization. "Richard, what is she talking about?" "Nothing. She's making things up." $3 million? Victoria's voice rose. "Property in Florida? Your mother's name?" "Victoria, not now." "Not now?" She turned on him with sudden fury. "You've been hiding money. While I've been planning our future, you've been—" "Planning our future with Paul Hendricks, you mean?" Richard shot back. "Don't act innocent. I know about your affair." The room fell silent. I spoke into the quiet. "I think," I said carefully, "that you two have a lot to discuss, and I think you're going to want to keep me employed while you figure out how to handle this situation. Because right now, I'm the only person who knows everything about both of you." Richard's hands clenched into fists. For a moment, I thought he might actually hit me. But then Victoria laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "She's right," Victoria said. "God help us, she's right." I picked up my cleaning supplies. "I'll be upstairs if you need me." As I walked out of the kitchen, I heard Richard hiss at his wife. "This is your fault. If you hadn't been so paranoid about the housekeeper." "My fault? My fault?" Their voices escalated into a full argument. I climbed the stairs to my room, closed the door, and sat on the bed, shaking. I'd won this round, but I knew it was far from over. For 3 days, an uneasy truce held in the Holloway house. Richard and Victoria barely spoke to each other, and they barely spoke to me. I went about my work in near silence, but the tension was suffocating, like waiting for a storm to break. I slept poorly those nights. Every sound in the old house made me jump. I kept thinking about Patricia Chen's warning. Men like that sometimes don't play by legal rules. What did that mean exactly? Would Richard try to intimidate me? Harm me? I started keeping my door locked at night. Wednesday afternoon, Richard knocked on my door during my break. Margaret, he corrected himself. "May I speak with you?" I opened the door but didn't invite him in. "Yes?" He looked tired. The polished veneer was cracking. "I want to propose a solution, a way forward that works for everyone." "I'm listening." $50,000. He said it bluntly. "Cash, tax-free. You sign an NDA, you leave this house, and you never speak about anything you heard here. Everyone walks away clean." $50,000. It was more money than I'd had at once in my entire life. It was security, breathing room, maybe enough to start over somewhere new. It was also a trap. "No," I said. Richard blinked. "No? Margaret, be reasonable. This is more than generous." "It's not generous, it's hush money. And the moment I take it, I'm complicit in your fraud." I held his gaze. Plus, I sign an NDA, and if I ever speak up later, you sue me for everything I have, including that $50,000. No thank you. His jaw tightened. You're making a mistake. You keep saying that. What do you want then? 100,000? Name your price. I don't want your money, Mr. Holloway. I want you to face consequences for what you've done. He stared at me like I was speaking a foreign language. In his world, everyone had a price. The idea that I genuinely didn't was incomprehensible to him. You're going to regret this, he said quietly, then walked away. Thursday, it was Victoria's turn. She invited me to sit with her in the sunroom over coffee, a gesture of false intimacy that set my teeth on edge. She was dressed impeccably as always, but I could see the stress in the tightness around her eyes. Margaret, she began, using my real name for the first time. I want to apologize for how we treated you. It was wrong. Thank you. And I want you to understand something. Whatever Richard has done, the hidden accounts, the fraud, I had no knowledge of it. None. I'm a victim here, too. I said nothing. I'm planning to file for divorce. My attorney will be subpoenaing all of Richard's financial records. If you have evidence that would help prove his deception, I'd be grateful if you'd share it with us. In exchange for what? She smiled slightly. In exchange for my gratitude, and perhaps a letter of recommendation for future employment. You're clearly a woman of intelligence and resourcefulness. It was more subtle than Richard's crude cash offer, but it was still manipulation. She wanted to use me as a weapon against her husband without giving me anything concrete in return. Mrs. Holloway, I appreciate the offer, but I need to think about my own interests here. Not yours, not your husband's, mine. Her smile faded. I see. Well, if you change your mind, let me know. As she walked away, I realized something important. Neither of them saw me as a person. To Richard, I was a problem to be solved with money. To Victoria, I was a tool to be used in her divorce. Neither of them considered that I might have my own agenda, my own sense of right and wrong. That evening, I did something I'd been avoiding for weeks. I called my daughter Jessica. Mom, is everything okay? Her voice was instantly concerned. I rarely called her this late. I told her everything. The whole story spilled out. The pretense, the evidence, the confrontations, the offers. When I finished, there was a long silence on the other end. Mom, I'm getting on a plane tomorrow. Jessica, no, you can't just... Yes, I can. I'm using miles. I'll be there Friday night. Her voice was firm. You're not going through this alone. I don't care what you say. Something in my chest loosened. I hadn't realized how badly I needed someone on my side. Okay. And Mom, I'm proud of you. What you're doing, standing up to these people, it takes guts. After we hung up, I sat in my small room and cried for the first time since this whole thing began. Not from fear or stress, but from relief. I wasn't alone anymore. Friday evening, Jessica arrived. She was 42 now, a software engineer with her father's practical mind and my stubborn streak. She took one look at my tiny room on the 4th floor, and her eyes flashed with anger. This is where they have you living? It's fine. It's a glorified closet, Mom. We went out to dinner at a small Italian restaurant in the North End, far from Beacon Hill. Over pasta and red wine, we talked strategy. You need a lawyer, Jessica said. A good one. I've talked to someone. She gave me a name, Laura Friedman, a divorce attorney. Call her Monday. In the meantime, I'm going to do some research on Richard Holloway. See what else I can find. Jessica pulled out her laptop. I'm good at digging through public records. It's basically what I do for a living, just with code instead of financial documents. Jessica, I don't want you getting involved in anything dangerous. Mom, you're already in danger. Let me help. We spent the weekend building a case. Jessica found property records showing the Florida condos. She found Richard's business registrations, his client list, news articles about his firm. She even found a public complaint filed against him 3 years ago by a former client, a complaint that had been quietly settled out of court. By Sunday night, we had a plan. Monday morning, I would contact Laura Friedman. Jessica would stay through the week, working remotely from Boston, providing me backup and support. "Whatever happens," Jessica said as we walked back toward Beacon Hill, "you're not facing them alone anymore." I squeezed her hand. For the first time in months, I felt something like hope. Monday morning, I called Laura Friedman from the public library. Her assistant scheduled an appointment for Wednesday afternoon. Jessica had already done a background check on Friedman. 15 years of high-profile divorce cases, a reputation for being ruthless in court, and a track record of uncovering hidden assets. She was perfect. I returned to the Holloway house feeling cautiously optimistic. But the moment I walked through the door, I sensed something was different. Victoria was waiting in the foyer, and she was smiling. A warm, genuine-seeming smile that immediately put me on alert. "Margaret, good morning. Do you have a moment? Richard and I would like to speak with you." This couldn't be good. They were both in the living room, Richard standing by the window, Victoria seated elegantly on the sofa. The morning light streaming through the tall windows made the scene feel surreal, almost staged. "Please sit," Victoria gestured to a chair. I sat, keeping my posture straight, my expression neutral. Richard spoke first. "Margaret, Victoria, and I have been doing a lot of thinking this weekend about everything, about our marriage, about our mistakes, and about how we've treated you. We owe you an apology," Victoria continued, "a real one. What we did, trying to bribe you, trying to intimidate you, it was wrong. We were scared and we lashed out." I said nothing, waiting. Richard moved closer, his expression earnest. "Here's the truth, Margaret. Our marriage has been broken for a long time. The affairs, the hidden money, these are symptoms of deeper problems. Problems that have nothing to do with you. We've decided to separate," Victoria said, "amicably. We're going to work with mediators and therapists to figure out a fair division of assets. No courtroom battles, no lawyers tearing each other apart." Richard nodded. "It's the right thing to do. For us, for our son, for everyone." There it was, the new strategy. They were presenting a united front, playing the role of mature adults making responsible decisions, and they wanted me to believe it. "That sounds very reasonable," I said carefully. "We're glad you think so," Victoria said. "And we want you to know, whatever you overheard while you were working here, whatever documents you might have seen, none of that matters now. We're handling our affairs privately, as it should be. What we're saying," Richard added, "is that there's no need for you to involve yourself further. No need to contact authorities or lawyers or journalists. We're taking care of everything internally." The manipulation was smooth, practiced. They were trying to make me feel like my crusade was unnecessary, even noble to abandon. Look, they're handling it themselves. You can walk away with a clear conscience, except I knew better. "And the fraud?" I asked bluntly. "The money you stole from David Westfield, are you handling that too?" Richard's mask slipped for just a moment, a flash of anger quickly suppressed. "That's a mischaracterization of a complex financial situation. It's theft. You moved his money into high-risk investments without his knowledge so you could pocket the profits." "Margaret," Victoria cut in, her voice taking on a pleading tone, "I understand you're angry. You have every right to be. But think about what you're doing. If you report Richard to the SEC, yes, he might face consequences. But so will his clients. David Westfield's portfolio will be frozen during the investigation. He might lose everything while the courts sort it out. Is that what you want?" It was a clever twist. Make me feel responsible for the victim's suffering. "And Brandon," Richard added, playing his trump card. "Our son. He's 17, applying to colleges. If this becomes a scandal, if I'm arrested and it's all over the news, it will ruin his life, his applications, his reputation, his future. Can you live with that?" They were good. I'd give them that. They knew exactly which emotional buttons to push. Make me doubt myself, make me feel guilty, make the easier path seem like the moral path. I stood up. "Are you finished?" Victoria blinked. "I'm sorry?" "Your performance. Are you finished?" I looked between them. "Because I stopped believing you about 30 seconds into this conversation." Richard's face hardened. "You're making a serious mistake. You keep saying that, but here's what I think is really happening. You two aren't reconciling. You're not handling anything amicably. You've just realized that if you're fighting each other in divorce court, I'm the wild card who could destroy you both. So you're pretending to make peace to neutralize me." Victoria stood as well, her warm facade crumbling. "You have no idea what you're dealing with." "I think I do. I think you're both terrified that your carefully constructed lives are about to collapse, and you'll say anything, promise anything, threaten anything to prevent that." "We're trying to protect our family," Richard said coldly. "No, you're trying to protect yourselves. There's a difference." I moved toward the door. "And as for Brandon, your son, maybe he'd be better off learning that actions have consequences. That might actually prepare him for real life better than growing up thinking his father can commit crimes without repercussions." "Get out!" Victoria hissed. "Get out of this house right now!" Gladly. I walked upstairs, packed my few belongings into a bag, and called Jessica. 20 minutes later, she pulled up in a rental car. As I loaded my bag into the trunk, Richard appeared on the front steps. "This isn't over, Margaret." "No," I agreed. "It's not." We drove away. In the rearview mirror, I watched Richard standing in front of his beautiful Beacon Hill mansion, his hands clenched at his sides. "You okay?" Jessica asked. My heart was racing, adrenaline flooding my system, but beneath the fear was something else, a cold, determined anger. "I'm fine. Take me to Laura Friedman's office." "It's Monday. Your appointment isn't until Wednesday." "I don't care. We're going now." Jessica glanced at me, then nodded and changed course. It was time to stop being reactive, time to go on the offensive. Laura Friedman's office was everything I expected. Sleek, professional, expensive. Her assistant tried to tell us we needed an appointment, but when I said, "Tell Miss Friedman that I have evidence of Richard Holloway hiding $3 million in offshore accounts and committing securities fraud," we were ushered in immediately. Laura Friedman was a woman in her mid-50s with silver hair cut in a sharp bob and eyes that missed nothing. She listened to my entire story without interrupting, then spent 20 minutes reviewing the photographs I'd taken and the documentation Jessica had compiled. Finally, she sat back and smiled. It was the smile of a predator who'd just spotted wounded prey. "Mrs. Collins, I've been waiting for a case like this for years. Do you have any idea how rare it is to have this level of documentation about hidden assets before a divorce filing? So you can use this?" "Can I use it?" "I can destroy him with it." She pulled out a legal pad. "Here's what's going to happen. First, I'm going to contact Victoria Holloway's attorney, who I assume is somewhere in Boston. I'm going to offer to provide this evidence in exchange for immunity for you from any civil liability." "Wait, Victoria's attorney? You're not representing her?" "No. This is better. You become a witness, not a party to the divorce. That protects you legally." Laura's pen moved swiftly across the pad. "Second, I'm going to contact the SEC about the Westfield fraud. That's criminal, not civil, and it needs to be handled by federal investigators." "Won't that take forever?" "Usually, yes, but securities fraud against elderly clients, the SEC moves fast on those, especially when you hand them a complete case on a silver platter." She looked up. "How old is David Westfield?" Richard mentioned he's been his client for 12 years, so I'd guess late 60s, early 70s? Perfect. Elder financial abuse. They'll have agents at his office within a week. Over the next 2 hours, Laura made phone calls. She spoke with Victoria's divorce attorney, a woman named Ruth Chambers. She spoke with a contact at the SEC. She spoke with a journalist at the Boston Globe who specialized in financial crimes. Each conversation was precise, controlled, devastating. By the time we left her office, the machinery was in motion. The confrontation happened faster than I expected. Thursday afternoon, just 3 days after I'd walked out of the Holloway house, my phone rang. It was an unknown number, but I answered. Margaret Collins? A man's voice, clipped and professional. Yes? This is Agent Michael Torres with the Securities and Exchange Commission. I'm calling to inform you that we've opened an investigation into Richard Holloway and his financial advisory firm. We'd like you to come to our office tomorrow to provide a formal statement. My hands shook as I wrote down the address and time. It was really happening. Jessica insisted on coming with me. We arrived at the SEC's Boston office Friday morning at 9 o'clock. Agent Torres was a serious man in his 40s who treated me with a respect I hadn't experienced in months. He asked detailed questions about everything I'd overheard, every document I'd photographed, every conversation I could remember. The interview lasted 3 hours. When we finished, Agent Torres said, Mrs. Collins, I want you to know that what you've provided is substantial. We're executing search warrants on Mr. Holloway's office and residence today at noon. At noon, in less than 3 hours. Will I have to testify? I asked. Eventually, yes, but we have enough to move forward with or without your testimony. You've given us the roadmap. Now we just have to follow it. Jessica and I went to a coffee shop near the Federal Building. I couldn't drink anything. My stomach was in knots. At 12:15, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was a photo. Federal agents standing in Richard Holloway's front doorway holding a warrant. The photo had been sent from Victoria's number. Ruth Chambers must have given it to her. There was no message, just the image. But I understood. Victoria was letting me know that Richard's world was collapsing and she was watching it happen. My phone rang 5 minutes later. Richard. I almost didn't answer, but Jessica said, "Put it on speaker. I want to hear this." I answered. "You vindictive bitch!" Richard's voice was shaking with rage. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I reported your crimes to the proper authorities. That's what I've done." "My office is crawling with federal agents. They're taking my files, my computers. They're interviewing my employees." He was almost shouting now. "They came to my house, Margaret. My house. In front of my neighbors." "Then you should have thought about that before you committed fraud." "I gave you a chance to walk away. I offered you money. You offered me hush money to help you get away with stealing from your clients." My voice was steady, cold. "Did you really think I would take it?" "You're nobody. You're a cleaning lady with nothing. I could have given you a future, and instead you've chosen to destroy yourself along with me." "I'm not destroying myself, Richard. I'm finally standing up for something. There's a difference. When this is over, when my lawyers tear apart your testimony and prove you illegally obtained those documents, I'm going to sue you for everything you have and everything you'll ever have." Jessica grabbed the phone from me. "Mr. Holloway, this is Margaret's daughter, Jessica Collins. I'm an attorney." She wasn't, but he didn't know that. "If you continue to threaten or harass my mother, I'll file for a restraining order and add witness intimidation to the list of charges you're already facing. Do we understand each other?" Silence on the other end. Then the line went dead. I looked at Jessica. "You're not an attorney." "He doesn't know that," she grinned. "Besides, I took pre-law for 2 semesters. Close enough." That evening, the Boston Globe published an article, "Local Financial Advisor Under Federal Investigation for Securities Fraud." It didn't name Richard initially, but by midnight, his name was everywhere, on social media, on financial blogs, in the comment sections of every news site in Boston. His reputation was finished. His career was over, and I had done that. Me. Margaret Collins. The invisible housekeeper nobody had bothered to notice. The next few weeks moved with the inexorable momentum of justice, slow sometimes but unstoppable. Richard Holloway was arrested on a Tuesday morning. The charges: wire fraud, securities fraud, elder financial abuse, and money laundering. His bail was set at $500,000, which he posted immediately, but the damage was done. Every news outlet in New England carried his photograph: the handcuffs, the perp walk, the fall from grace. His firm immediately placed him on administrative leave. By the end of the week, 3 more clients had come forward claiming suspicious losses in their portfolios. The SEC expanded its investigation. David Westfield, the elderly client Richard had defrauded, released a statement through his attorney. "I trusted Richard Holloway for over a decade. He was a guest in my home. He attended my wife's funeral, and he stole from me. I'm grateful to the brave woman who exposed his crimes. That brave woman, they meant me." The media tried to find me, of course. Reporters called, left messages, showed up at Jessica's hotel. But Laura Friedman had prepared me for this. "Say nothing," she'd advised. "Let the evidence speak for itself. You're not the story. His crimes are." So I stayed silent and watched Richard's empire crumble from a distance. Victoria filed for divorce 3 days after Richard's arrest. Ruth Chambers, her attorney, used every piece of evidence I'd provided: the Cayman accounts, the Florida properties, the hidden assets in his mother's name. Richard's attorneys tried to fight back, claiming I'd obtained the documents illegally, but the judge was unimpressed. "Mr. Holloway," the judge said during a preliminary hearing I attended, "you left these documents in plain sight in an unlocked file cabinet in a room where your employee worked daily. You have no reasonable expectation of privacy under those circumstances." Richard's face was purple with rage as the ruling came down. Victoria would receive 70% of all marital assets, including those he'd attempted to hide. The Florida properties would be sold and the proceeds divided. The Cayman accounts would be frozen pending the outcome of his criminal trial. He'd spent years carefully building his fortress of wealth and secrets. It took less than a month to tear it down. But the moment that mattered most to me came on a Thursday afternoon in late May. Agent Torres called. "Mrs. Collins, I wanted you to be the first to know. David Westfield is getting his money back. We've recovered the $800,000 that was illegally diverted, plus penalties and interest. He's being made whole." I closed my eyes and felt something break open in my chest. "Thank you for telling me." "No, Mrs. Collins, thank you. People like you, witnesses who come forward despite the personal cost, you're the reason we can do our jobs." After we hung up, I sat in Jessica's hotel room and cried. Not from sadness, but from relief, from vindication, from the overwhelming realization that I'd actually succeeded. David Westfield was getting his money back. An elderly man who'd done nothing wrong except trust the wrong person. He was going to be okay, because of me. That evening, Jessica took me to dinner at an upscale restaurant on Newberry Street, the kind of place I'd never been able to afford before. She'd been making arrangements all week, but wouldn't tell me what they were. Over dessert, she handed me an envelope. "What's this?" "Open it." Inside was a check for $60,000. I stared at it, unable to process what I was seeing. "Jessica, what?" "It's from Ruth Chambers. Well, technically it's from Victoria, but Ruth arranged it. It's a consulting fee for the evidence you provided in the divorce case." Jessica smiled. "Completely legal, completely documented. You earned it." "I don't want Victoria's money." It's not charity, Mom. You gave her the ammunition she needed to get a fair settlement. She's keeping millions because of what you did. This is just a finder's fee, basically. I looked at the check again. $60,000, more than I'd made in the entire previous year. Enough to start over, enough for security, for breathing room, for a future. There's more, Jessica said. Laura Friedman is getting calls from other divorce attorneys. Apparently, you're becoming something of a legend in family law circles. The housekeep who took down a corrupt financier. 3 different firms have reached out asking if you'd be willing to work as a consultant on cases involving hidden assets. Me, as a consultant. Think about it. You know how wealthy people hide money because you've seen it from the inside. You know what to look for, what questions to ask, what documents matter. That's valuable expertise. I sat back, overwhelmed. I just wanted to do the right thing. I know, but good actions have consequences too, not just bad ones. Jessica reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You stood up for yourself, for David Westfield, for everyone Richard Holloway ever hurt. And now you get to rebuild your life on your own terms. The final piece of Richard's fall came in July. His criminal trial was scheduled for September, but his attorneys negotiated a plea deal. Richard pled guilty to 3 counts of securities fraud in exchange for a reduced sentence. 5 years in federal prison. His financial advisory license was permanently revoked. He was ordered to pay restitution to all affected clients, a sum totaling over $2 million. His reputation, his career, his freedom, all gone. I attended the sentencing hearing. I wanted to see it with my own eyes. Richard looked diminished in his orange jumpsuit standing before the judge. His expensive suit was gone. His polish was gone. He was just a man facing the consequences of his choices. Before the sentence was announced, the judge allowed victim impact statements. David Westfield's attorney read one on his behalf. I'm 82 years old. That money Richard Holloway stole was my life savings. It was supposed to pay for my care as I age. He didn't just steal money. He stole my peace of mind, my security, my dignity. Then the judge looked at me. Mrs. Collins, would you like to make a statement? I stood. Richard's eyes met mine across the courtroom. Your Honor, I don't have much to add to what Mr. Westfield said, but I want the court to know this. Richard Holloway didn't just commit fraud. He built his entire life on a foundation of lies and contempt. He believed rules didn't apply to him. He believed people like me, working people, ordinary people, were invisible and powerless. I paused. He was wrong about that, thank you. As I sat down, I saw something in Richard's face I'd never seen before. Fear. 6 months after Richard's sentencing, I stood in the living room of my new apartment in Jamaica Plain and smiled. It wasn't much, a 1-bedroom on the 2nd floor of a converted triple-decker, but it was mine. I'd signed the lease with my own money, $60,000 from Victoria, plus another $40,000 I'd earned consulting on 3 different divorce cases. I'd even started putting money into savings again. Real savings. Building toward an actual retirement. The consulting work had turned into something bigger than I'd imagined. Laura Friedman referred me to other attorneys. They referred me to others. Word spread through Boston's legal community. Margaret Collins, the woman who brought down Richard Holloway, was available to help in cases involving hidden assets and financial deception. I'd worked on 8 cases in the past 6 months. Sometimes I reviewed financial documents, looking for the telltale signs of hidden accounts. Sometimes I interviewed household staff, other housekeepers, nannies, personal assistants, who'd overheard things but didn't know what to do with the information. I taught them what I'd learned, how to document, how to gather evidence legally, how to protect themselves. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent 3 months pretending to be someone I wasn't, invisible in a rich family's house. Now I was teaching others how to see the invisible, how to notice what powerful people assumed no one would notice. The work paid better than I'd ever dreamed. I charged $200 an hour for consultations, and attorneys paid without hesitation. In my first month, I made more than I'd earned in an entire year as Richard's housekeeper. But it wasn't just about the money. It was about purpose. For the first time since David died, I felt like I mattered, like my life had direction and meaning. Jessica visited often. She'd decided to stay in Boston for a while, taking a remote position with her Seattle company. "Someone needs to keep an eye on you," she'd said. But we both knew the truth. We'd grown closer through this ordeal. We'd become partners, not just mother and daughter. On a crisp October morning, we met for coffee at a cafe in Brookline. Jessica was scrolling through her phone when she suddenly laughed. "You need to see this." She turned her phone toward me. It was a LinkedIn profile. Richard Holloway. His profile photo was gone, replaced by the generic gray silhouette LinkedIn uses for people without pictures. His job title had changed from senior financial advisor to currently seeking opportunities. His list of connections had shrunk from over 500 to less than 100. "Look at the comments," Jessica said. Someone had posted on his profile, "Is this the Richard Holloway who was convicted of fraud?" The post had 73 likes. "That's brutal," I said. "That's justice." Jessica took back her phone. "I've been keeping tabs on him. He's working at a call center now, collections for a credit card company, making $12 an hour." From high-powered financial advisor to collections agent, the fall was complete. And Victoria? She's doing better, remarried actually, to Paul Hendricks, the architect. Jessica pulled up a society page photo. They got married in Martha's Vineyard last month. Small ceremony. I studied the photo. Victoria looked happy, genuinely happy in a way I'd never seen during my time in her home. She'd gotten her settlement, gotten her divorce, gotten her fresh start. "Good for her," I said, and meant it. "She sent you a wedding invitation, you know, to your old email address." "She did?" "Yeah. It was forwarded to Laura's office. There was a note. Said she wanted to thank you in person for everything you did, but understood if you didn't want to come." I hadn't gone, of course. Victoria and I weren't friends. We'd been temporary allies in taking down a common enemy, nothing more. But it was nice to know she'd thought of me. My phone buzzed. A text from Laura Friedman. "New case. High net worth divorce. Wife suspects hidden assets. Interested?" I texted back, "Send me the details." This was my life now. It was good. November brought an unexpected development. A producer from a Boston television station reached out through Laura's office. They wanted to do a story about my case, how a housekeeper exposed a major financial fraud scheme. I was hesitant. I'd avoided media attention for months, but the producer was persuasive. "Mrs. Collins, your story matters. There are thousands of people, household employees, service workers, who see things they don't know how to report. You could help them." I agreed to one interview. The segment aired on a Tuesday evening. They'd titled it, "The Housekeeper Who Wouldn't Be Silent." I watched it at Jessica's apartment, nervous about how I'd come across. But they'd done it justice. They'd interviewed David Westfield, who spoke movingly about the impact of Richard's fraud. They'd interviewed Agent Torres from the SEC, who praised my courage. They'd even gotten a comment from Ruth Chambers, Victoria's attorney, who called me a model witness. The segment ended with my face filling the screen. Sometimes the most powerful person in the room is the one nobody is paying attention to. Remember that. After it aired, my phone exploded. Texts from friends I hadn't heard from in years. Emails from strangers thanking me. 3 more attorneys wanting to hire me for consultations. And one message that made me smile. An invitation to speak at a conference for household workers about employee rights and what to do if you witness illegal activity in a client's home. Me, speaking at a conference. Who would have thought? December came, and with it the first anniversary of David's death. Jessica and I visited his grave together, bringing flowers and standing in the cold. "He'd be proud of you, Mom," Jessica said quietly. "I hope so." "I know so. You turned a tragedy into something meaningful. That's powerful." I looked at the headstone, David Collins, beloved husband and father, and felt a complicated mix of emotions. Grief, yes, that would never fully go away, but also gratitude and pride and hope for the future. As for Richard Holloway, I heard he'd moved to Florida after his release on parole, trying to start over far from Boston where everyone knew his name and his crimes. But reputation follows you in the internet age. Former colleagues had posted warnings about him online. His Wikipedia page prominently featured his conviction. He'd never work in finance again, never rebuild his wealth, never regain the respect he'd once commanded. Some might say I destroyed his life. I prefer to think I'd simply revealed the truth about who he already was. So that's my story. The housekeeper who wouldn't stay silent. I'm 60 years old now. I have a career I never imagined, doing work that matters. I help people find hidden truth and get justice. Every day, I wake up with purpose. Here's my question for you. If you were in my position, would you have spoken up? Would you have risked everything to do what was right? Think about that. And if you have your own story about standing up to injustice, I'd love to hear it in the comments below. This channel has more stories like mine, real people facing impossible choices and finding courage. Subscribe if you want to hear them. Thank you for listening to my journey. Remember, you're never as powerless as someone wants you to believe. Never forget that.